Guys, it is that time. It's 9 a.m. Hawaii time, and we promised everyone we're going to start, and we are starting. So this is livinginhawaii.com. With my really good friends that were here last week. We don't have to go through an intro again. If you want, you should watch that show to get their background. Here's the basically what we kind of figured on what the topics were going to be for today is to talk about basically April, do a little bit of sales analysis in April and find out kind of, what was hit hardest. Are there any bright spots? Essentially, based on what we saw happening in April and based on all the news, where do we see kind of things going? Who wants to go first? I know, Dylan, why don't you kind of lead this off? Because you had a couple of, should I go to the next slide on this, Dylan? And then you can kind of hit this, or how do you guys want to do this? Who wants to go first? Let's do it that way.
Two more down. We can hit the big island real quick. Two more down. There we go. So this is just a real simple slide of some kind of top level data points that we always look at when we're looking at previous months' data and then comparing it to the year prior. So just to kind of explain the slide, this is the April 2020 sales data versus the April 2019 sales data. So we can compare what the numbers were this month versus a year ago. And it gives us a little bit of a perspective on change. And for the last really 8 years or so, we've seen kind of steady increases. I mean, there's been some volatility when there was the eruption here on the Big Island in 2018. But as we've been saying for the last couple of months, we really weren't going to see the effects of COVID until April, because most of the sales that occurred in March, when everything kind of started to take effect lockdown wise, those sales in the real estate sales cycle started in January before there was really any concern. So things that go into escrow in January and February usually close in March. So the closings in April would have been affected by late February and through the month of March. So we're seeing definitely a slowdown and a change, especially in closed sales. So this is just single family homes on the Big Island. And this, if you break this data down regionally, it's much worse on the west side, because that's where you have more of the second home buyer and the mainland buyer who obviously couldn't come here in March to look for property. So there was a 15% decline in the number of closed sales in April this year versus April of last year. And then the median price, actually, I looked into this to check because it seems so off, but the median price in April 2019 was kind of an anomaly. It was low for the time. I mean, normally it was closer to 300,000 during that time frame in the year. So this number is a little bit deceiving. The median price actually this month is lower than the median price last month. So there was a little bit of a drop. So if we look at it compared year over year, it looks kind of deceiving that there's this humongous increase in median price. But there wasn't the important thing to consider here is there wasn't a big change. Median price pretty much stayed the same as it's been the last 6 months or so. So there was a reduction in the number of homes that sold, but there wasn't a huge reduction in price. But there was a huge reduction in the number of listings. And we talked about this last week, and we've been looking at and preparing for this, that the number of new listings fell by 45%. So literally half the number of listings are on the market right now than were a year ago. And that's mainly due to sellers just being uneasy about the market right now and holding back. But as we talked a little bit about last week, and I've been telling seller clients, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because now you have less competition. So back a year ago, when somebody was looking in an area and maybe they had 10 or 15 homes to look at that fit their criteria, now they may only have 6 or 7 or 8. So you have less competition and less stuff for people to look at. And buyers are still out there buying. We're still seeing homes go under contract and into escrow. So there was a big change, in terms of the number of homes on the market and inventory. But that's something to consider if you're a seller, is, you may not want to wait. And Scott had mentioned last week that right now, if you're a seller, you're working off of comps from the last 6 months, which was a good market. So when you need to get an appraisal done and things like that, you're looking at good comps. Going forward, 3 or 4 months from now, they're going to start looking at comps right now. And if there's a shift in the market, it can change what your value is at that point. So it's something to consider as a seller.
Awesome. So do you want to go over the condo slide too, or is that just pretty much
we can hit the condo slide and then
turn over real quick.
Yeah, so real quick. Same thing. Condos were obviously hit a lot worse. Condos are primarily a second home vacation rental type investment here on the Big Island. And this condo market, although this is from the entire Big Island, is primarily driven by the west side of the island. The west coast of the island is where most of the condo inventory is. So if you see, there's a 60% drop in the number of closed sales in April versus a year ago. So huge drop. Median price was about the same. It was down 5%, but we see that fluctuate from month over month. So not a huge change there. And then new listings, just like the home market, down 47%. So people either pulled or didn't put their condos on the market this past month. So big change in the condo market.
All right. So as my eyes start getting crossed now because I'm staring at numbers for too long. Scott, is there anything that's different about what's going on with, so Dylan's kind of showing us, the thing here, the closed sales are way down, new listings are way down. Is there anything different about Oahu's market other than some of the numbers wise, but is there anything kind of major, or is Oahu generally following this same trend?
No, there's actually some really interesting stuff. If I could share my screen, it might be a little beneficial. Let me know when you can see it on your end.
Yeah, hold on. Hold on. Wait, your screen is on.
Okay, so just to kind of give some perspective, a little historic on the back end historic side of things. What I pulled up here is you have from 1985 through 2019, which is 35 years for single family homes. Our annual appreciation rate is 4.69%, and the average appreciation rate is 4.4%. And for condos, it's 4.5, and for on the median and 4.65. So they're basically the same, right? 4.5% roughly log linear appreciation, which it doesn't do. It's going to cycle some, but that's what you can kind of so just
basically, yeah.
Background perspective. If we look at single family homes for the month of April, there's some actually really interesting data, and I geek out on this stuff because I am a numbers guy, but I'm looking for trends. And part of that comes because I have the development company and I deal with a lot of investment side stuff. But the closed sales were down 22% for April for single family homes island-wide compared to April 2019. The median sales price is up 5.5%, but I don't even look at that right now. We're basically, it's too small of a data set. I go to the year-to-date portion to look at the median sales price. And the interesting thing is, we're 2.5 months in on an old market that was doing really well. And that old market was trending right along at our historic average of 4.5% roughly, which is good. That's kind of a sustainable market, right? Now we've got a month and a half of data basically going into a completely different market that we're trying to figure out. So I don't look at that April month's sales portion too much because I want to see more data just to make sure it's not skewed. But even just price wise, year to date, 2020 to 2019, we're up 1.7% right now, which is pretty good considering. But the funny thing is median days on market dropped from 25 days last year in April to 19. So things are moving faster, even though the economy just got gummed up and froze and stopped. And what we're seeing is less listings coming on the market. Because if you look at the line below that, our number of listings are off 45%. So it's like, okay, everyone kind of froze. We don't really want to come on the market. Median on market, the only reason that's going to drop is because there's still buyer demand in the marketplace. And you see that in pending sales. Pending sales for this past month are only off 7% from the previous month. So that's 100 and some more transactions occurring than new listings coming on the market. So your inventory is tightening right now, which is fascinating to me because there's more buyers buying than listings coming on. And our months of inventory remaining went from 3.5 months to 2.5 months. And to give that perspective, a balanced market is 6 months of inventory, meaning equal number of buyers and sellers in the market. That's supply demand balance. If you get below that, 3 to 4 months of inventory should yield about 5% price appreciation. We're now at 2.5 months of inventory. And during the boom back in 2006, 2007, we were at like 1.4 months of inventory. So we're getting into areas where, okay, that's why you're seeing days on market drop. And even our list to sales price ratio jumped up a little bit from, it's at 98%. List to sales price ratio. You put your home on the market for $100,000, you should expect to get 98.4% of that. And the active listings right now from this year to last year dropped 25%. So I don't think this trend is going to continue. I think in other words, the buyer demand is there. The sellers are afraid to come on the market. We've got tightening inventory. I just showed property in Kailua 2 days last week. There were 20 showings in 2 days. We've got multiple offers. I submitted 2 offers. We got multiple offers on both those properties. I showed in Palolo. We had 9 showings in 2 days, and we were competing with multiple offers. So the buyer demand is there right now. We can kind of get into, okay, what's going to happen in the future? Maybe a year.
So here's my question for both you guys is that, okay, saw some numbers. My eyes are still kind of crossed, even though I consider myself a numbers guy. I just got fed a whole bunch of percentages. I kind of get some sense of sort of what's going on. But, from a layman's point of view, what do you think this means? What does this mean? What's going on? Either of you.
Well, I mean, what's going on is sellers were afraid to come on the market. You close down the economy, and you only do that because you're concerned about health and safety, right? Which in doing so, every homeowner goes, I don't want strangers in my home, so I'm going to delay going on the market if I don't have to go on now, or if I'm living in there, I have my kids in there. And that's what's happened. That's why you see a drop in the number of new listings by 45%. It's, hey, we don't want people in our homes. We're going to hold off as long as we can. But the buyer demand stayed. People that were in the market or people that were looking to buy, it held pretty well during this time. So now you just had this where we were already in a tight inventory at 3.5 months of inventory. The inventory dropped even more, so it got even more restricted. So now you have even more restricted supply and people willing to buy. And it's keeping our market very much in line with where we were. Nothing's changed. The stay-at-home order that's going to be lifted and we're starting to ease stuff is actually going to change that portion. And I'll just show you this real quick on my.
So while you're getting that part ready, I want to get Dylan's take on what you see. I mean, what's the word on the streets, so to speak, in Kona, or what what's your take on this?
I think the simple take is that there is no crisis. I think the news and sometimes perceptions and social media can make things feel or look worse than they are. And the reality is you have to look at people's behavior, and people's behavior is not reflecting that right now. Going back to what Scott's saying, people are still buying, there isn't a huge crisis right now in the real estate market. And if you're waiting for some enormous drop and great deals in the future, so far, based on the April numbers, that's not necessarily going to happen. It's not a safe bet that that's going to happen. So, I think the big takeaway just from the April numbers, and again, we got to see, it seems like things are lining up and going to go back to normal here. So it's not going to be as bad as I think maybe people's perceptions of it were 30 days ago when this all started.
Well, one takeaway I got from what both you guys were saying is that it seems that the market has tightening up. Oahu's the inventory is kind of shrinking. Now this may all change. The comps may change, etc. But it almost seems to me somewhat maybe counterintuitively that right now might be a pretty good time to sell because the prices haven't dropped. There's a demand that's still there. This is not a bad time to sell, which normally one might not think that is a good time to sell right now. Go ahead.
And that definitely depends on what kind of property you have, right? I mean, there's definitely pockets where if you live in a resort community that's primarily a vacation rental market, and investors and second home buyers are buying there, now's definitely not a good time. I mean, how are you going to sell a vacation rental based off of vacation rental income when there are no vacation rentals right now? So if that all returns and things go back to normal, then hey, maybe it's a good time. Maybe those people want to hold off. If you live in a regular neighborhood where local people who have to go to work every day want to live, there's no reason not to put your house in the market right now. Those people are still buying. My house was a perfect example of that. I'm seeing that almost since this thing started, we've been putting at least one property into escrow every week. And it's usually some type of, just local buyer who lives here, who wants to purchase for the first time. Lots of still first-time home buyers that are buying that are just going to continue on with life. They're not going to stop right now and you sit on their hands just because all of this stuff is going on. They're still looking at property and they're still buying.
So basically, if you have a residential home, you're good. If you have an Airbnb special, forget about it. Scott, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is keep in mind the interest rates just dropped to historic lows and they dropped by more than 1%. So now you've added also on the buy side a good opportunity. So not only did the buyer demand not diminish, but you actually might have added more buyers to the market during this time frame because of the historic rates, the lows in rates.
Yeah, thanks for that. We just had a quick shout out here from KT. Glad you found KT. Glad you found the show. Glad you're here, and we're super happy to have you a part of it. Okay, Scott. Now you had some other things that you wanted to share. You want to bring your so let me know when your screen is ready. So okay, all right, stand by. All right, go.
So I think so. Part of this is I feel like there's a snapshot of what we have going on, which is, we shut down the economy. Essentially, everyone went stay at home. You have the 14-day quarantine, and everything just kind of froze. And okay, what comes out of the back end of this? Because this freezing of the economy and freezing of kind of what we're doing is a short-term thing. And as we start to loosen, which they're starting to now, okay, what happens next? Where are we going from here? And so we keep track of some back end data, which is actually pretty interesting. So what you're looking at here is number of new listings, and we have it for the week, to May 4th. And on the side over here, we have what happened in the last 7 days, what happened in the last 30 days. Number of new listings in the last 7 days for Oahu is down 38% from the previous year, or previous month last year. And for the last 30 days is down 42%. You can see in the graph here, we've bottomed out on that. And I think I'm starting to feel more listings coming on the market. I've got 3 or 4 people now that we're prepping the homes to come on mid this month to the end of this month, anticipating the stay-at-home order getting lifted. Because of the restricted supply, now's the time to come on the market as a seller. So I think what we're going to see is more listings coming on the market going forward now as we open this up. But the big question going forward now is the only buyers we really have in the market are on island buyers because of the quarantine. And there was an article that came out the other day that said, okay, when do we anticipate to open up the economy to tourists, which is, the article said they're anticipating the end of July. All right, well, if we get more listings coming on the market and still just the same buyer pool here, and we've eliminated anybody off island, okay, now what happens? Because now you start to increase the inventory, but you're not increasing the buyer pool. Is the buyer pool that's here already able to absorb the increased listings that come on the market? The longer this shakes out, the more restrictions we have on how we run our economy. And that even goes to social distancing. I mean, you open restaurants at 50% capacity. That's 50% of the amount of revenue that a restaurant owner can earn. It trickles down everywhere. Okay, how does this affect us in the long run for the rest of this year? I do think the buy opportunity in general will be when the stay-at-home is lifted, and having at least more choices coming on the market at that time.
So the big thing for me is I'm going to be wondering about kind of how. Here's my general sense. My general sense is that the people who the locals and this is just gut from nothing more than basically gut, right? With a little bit of your guys' data. My gut says that the local folks are going to hold. Unless I've got to sell my house, I'm going to hold on to it because it's probably okay. It's not falling apart. I might be outgrowing it, but there's nothing that tells me I can't kind of hold on to it a little bit longer. I'm going to hold on to this house because I don't want to risk a crazy market that's a little bit like right now the numbers look good, but that doesn't mean that the numbers are going to look good next month. Maybe we get some, Hawaii's at some 37-40% unemployment rate. And our wise leader is going to keep us shut down for another month. God knows they're saying recovery ain't going to start from the visitor industry until, like you said, July. God knows what's going to happen then. Was Warren Buffett sold all his holdings in the airlines. That tells me that he doesn't see the airlines coming back anytime soon. Airlines is our lifeblood. Who knows what's going to happen? So I think that people are going to hold the locals are going to hold their real estate. So there may be some kind of horse trading going on until the visitors come back. I think the big huge question mark is going to be about the import buyers buying in. Now, one thing that's interesting to me about the import buyers is going to be, as we go forward, Hawaii already is, not arguably, objectively speaking, Hawaii is the cleanest COVID-free spot in America. We are the most COVID-free. So I can see a certain class of people who kind of want to escape this, and they're independently wealthy. They don't have to worry about making money. They've got their whatever, great time to buy and move to a place. If you've been thinking about buying in Hawaii and you're financially independent, you don't have to worry about the job market here locally. It might be a perfect time to buy and move yourself in. I know that makes any sense at all, but there's my gut right there. Dylan, what's your sense of that?
So, exactly along those lines, I have at least 5 conversations a week with, clients or contacts that I've been talking to for a while that are saying, I was thinking about moving there in 2 years, or I was thinking about retiring in 3 or 4 years. But given what has happened, and, if you're living in a big city right now, you probably are rethinking whether or not that's where you want to be when something like this happens. And at the end of the day, it's not fun no matter where you are, but Hawaii's a pretty good place to be when something like this happens. And so I think there's going to be some pretty significant pent-up demand once things do open up. I'm already having, multiple conversations a week with people saying, hey, you think it's safe to book at the end of June? You think it's safe to book in the end of July? We want to rebook they were planning to come, March or April, but had to push it back for lockdown reasons. But I think those people are gonna. I'm almost looking at not having a day off in July, because there's going to be so many people here, I think, wanting to buy at that point. As long as everything clears up and they open the flights back up, which right now it looks like that's pretty likely. I mean, the trend of the cases are going down. I mean, it's kind of happening everywhere, but it's definitely happening here. I think we only had 3 new cases yesterday or something like that. I mean, it's in the lower single digits.
For all practical purposes, in Honolulu City of 1 million people, or statewide, a state of 1.4 million, they have 2 or 3 or 4 cases. You might as well say 0. There's really, it's kind of, it's pretty much done.
It's under control. So
yeah,
all of those folks who were looking to come in the last couple of months that needed to delay, or maybe we're looking to come next year and want to do it sooner rather than later. We're going to be seeing those folks. So back to what Scott was saying about, there may be more listings coming on the market. Will it balance out with the number of just local buyers that we have on island? That's also going to be counteracted with, I think, an increased demand of folks, not necessarily coming to vacation. The vacationers may not come back right away. But if you are looking to move and purchase property, you're going to get on a plane as soon as possible and come and do it. So, that may be your intent. Is not necessarily to come here and just sit on the beach. You may just come for 4 or 5 days to actually do a buy-in trip and look at stuff and figure out your plan. And those are the folks that are going to rebalance the amount of increased inventory we're probably going to see in the next couple months.
So, which almost kind of tells me that I'm kind of sensing that, okay, if I'm not mistaken, I believe all the Airbnbs have been declared non-essential. So you can't legally check into an Airbnb. Now, you certainly, again, forget about the visitors. And I put out that video on the channel. Don't come to Hawaii. It doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to encourage any visitors to break any laws. It's the 14-day quarantine. Please don't take this video to construe that you should be taking you're a fool, right? You're a fool if you take a 2-week vacation in Hawaii right now, because you're going to be in your hotel. There was a side note, there was a story, I don't know if you guys caught this, but there was a discussion at the legislature that what they're thinking about, I don't know if this is not a law yet, but they're thinking about as a way to kind of keep people holed up in their rooms. You get to check into your hotel room and they don't give you the key. You can't lock your room. How's that one, right? How's that for a way to keep you locked into your room? They don't give you the key. So you can't lock your room. You can't go back in. So anyway, be that as it may. So I'm kind of seeing maybe another, if I think about sort of opportunity, or think about what people want, I could almost see a potential opportunity for people who have short-term rentals. And if you want to rent your unit for, let's say, a 3-month period, for people who want to come and do a real estate tour, follow the law. You come into a short-term rental, you stay quarantined for 14 days, don't break any laws. But after the 14-day period expires, you're a free person. And now you can kind of explore and look around in somewhat of a pristine market in Hawaii, to explore and see if you can find the right real estate property for you. That's a potential. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things on that. I mean, I've got a client that has 7 Airbnbs and they're all empty. luckily he's in a good financial position to be able to carry. But the discussion we had with him right off the bat, I said, look, Airbnb is the largest hotel operator technically in the world, bigger than any other hotel chain. And they're all empty. People aren't able to come here and even do the Airbnb portion. So the Airbnb side here, which is mainly going to be Waikiki, is really significantly getting affected. Move it to long-term rentals, right? Do something. You got to, rather than it sit totally empty, even if you cut the rents on it, you get it rented out in some capacity, even for a longer-term portion. But going back to a little bit on the economic portion, if until we open up the state, we're circulating money within the economy here, which is just trading money back and forth between the locals. You don't grow an economy that way. You have to have an export. Our export happens to be tourism, which brings money into the state, which allows the economy to grow. And as long as we have any restrictions in place, we can't get back to exactly where we were. So we're going to have some kind of economic effect from that. To me, it has to correlate to prices and some kind of, housing and housing prices and some kind of effect. I don't know that we're going to have much of a drop, but there are a couple of opportunities that are pretty fabulous, that are really interesting out there that I see. And part of it correlates to exactly what you guys are saying. If you got an Airbnb unit and you've got no rental income on it, what is that thing worth at this point? When are you going to be able to get that income back? And when is it going to be back at the same level that it was 3-4 months ago? So how do you value those?
The other factor with the Airbnbs and the vacation rentals is if the visitors don't return right away, we may see an increase in inventory because people need to sell those, and not everybody's in a cash carrying position to continue to pay those, especially if it's a condo, those maintenance fees, if they have a mortgage on it, that mortgage. So that may play into inventory also if the tourist visitor industry doesn't rebound quickly. And, we got 6-12 months of 30-40% decrease in the number of visitors that are coming. That's definitely going to play into the inventory aspect of this. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's an argument out there that these Airbnbs take up housing units that normal folks would normally buy and live in. So just because it is an Airbnb doesn't mean it can't be used as a single family residence or a regular long-term residence or a long-term rental. So we may see some of that shift also, where Airbnb shift into long-term rentals or go on the market, and folks that are looking for a place to live and not necessarily purchase those. So that'll definitely be a dynamic we'll see, I think, in the next few months.
Well, to me, my sort of headline is, until the visitor industry, until we see signs of a visitor industry that's rebounding in a healthy way, and we see some kind of a curve, in many ways, all bets are off. I mean, we've got this sort of, like Scott was saying, this current sort of internal rotation where locals are switching houses. Basically, Dylan, you sold your house to a local family, and you just bought a house from another local family, right? So it's like families kind of moving inventory around, which is going to work for a little while. But if this visitor industry doesn't rebound in a pretty predictable way, all bets are off. All bets are off. We're $17 billion a year economy right now. We're at zero. When the airlines are going to come back, when flights are going to start arriving, how they're going to make that happen, how they're going to do that, those are all up in the air.
And there's a huge trickle-down effect with that also, because if you there's plenty of people who live here who work in a restaurant who make very good money, even just at a high-end restaurant at Roy's or something, and they make $100,000 a year with their tips and their regular salary. They could be a buyer. Right now they're not. They're out of the market because there is no income. They're on unemployment, whatever the case is. And with the way that lenders have changed their guidelines since this has hit, before you could, if you were on like short-term unemployment, continue to move through a transaction. Right now, they're pretty much saying, no way, we're not doing anything with you until you're fully employed again and you have 2 paychecks. So that's a big piece. There's a big piece of the buyer pool, the local buyer pool who work here, who are out of the market right now, because if they're on some type of unemployment or furlough, lenders are not giving them loans at this moment. So that'll be interesting to see, how that affects the long-term aspect, because there's so many people who make their income based off of that visitor industry. So
that's a really good point. Let's shift that a little bit. And by the way, everybody, Dylan has kind of asked us if there's any questions. If you do have any questions, throw them into the chat, and I'll try to bring them up, and we'll try to address them. This is your chance. It's 9:30. I want to keep this certainly to under an hour. But if you have any questions, just kind of shoot them. But let's kind of shift this a little bit. What is going on with the banks? Scott, now you had some insight from, you have a close friend that is in the banking industry. What's the word on the street as far as, what's legally occurred, and what's the word on the street of what's coming up?
There's a couple of things. For one, when the stock market started to go down, it dropped significantly. That dropped interest rates, but lenders obviously saw the writing on the wall at that point. They started getting flooded with refinances, and the credit market started to seize up, and the federal government had to step in on the back end and stabilize that. With the number of refis, banks started actually raising their interest rates just to kind of hold off the amount of demand. Plus, they started to get nervous, going, okay, where are we going with this market? And we don't want to be giving loans to a bunch of people that technically on paper look good, but here in 2 months they may not, and they may go belly up. So they tighten their guidelines, bigger down payment, higher FICO scores, more reserves. Even VA started tightening their guidelines, because they're guaranteeing the loan at 100% financing. So the bank's natural reaction is to get more restrictive, so that if there is damage coming down the road, they're not stuck with a bunch of loans that default on them. But in general, now that things have stabilized, at least on the stock market side and whatnot, we're seeing, rates, they're about 3.25% or 3% for VA right now, which is really good. 2 months ago, you were at 4 and 4.5%. But the guidelines are a little tighter. And that's kind of the main aspect.
What I'm also seeing is they're being very careful about ensuring that everything is accurate. So they're calling the day of funding to make sure that borrower is still employed. And I've seen several transactions cancel right at the last minute because a borrower's hours were cut, or they were laid off and they didn't tell anybody. They thought maybe they could just get the loan closed and then move forward and figure it out. But we're seeing that the banks, they're supposed to do that. Sometimes they're not as, I think, diligent about it, but they're definitely verifying right up until the last minute that nothing has changed with their employment, because if something has, they're pulling the plug on the loan.
So this is clearly another dynamic that's going to affect that whether it's short term or long term, we're not sure. But again, until this thing starts to recover, kind of all bets are off, right? Because you got reduced. Go ahead, Dylan.
I'm telling everybody that I'm in a transaction with, whether I'm on the buyer side or the seller side, if they're my buyer client, I'm telling them, please communicate with me if anything weird happens. If there's even a discussion about your hours being cut or a furlough coming, you need to let us know, because we need to let the lender know, and we don't want to drag this on further than it has to. And if you do, then you start doing things like putting your earnest money at risk. If you miss out, if you end up getting conditional loan approval when you shouldn't have because something had changed, you didn't tell anybody. So that's one piece of it. And I'm also asking, if I'm on the seller side, asking that buyer's agent, please check with your buyer. Let's make sure that we're having this open conversation and not letting anything happen that is going to jeopardize this transaction. Because if bad news doesn't get better with time, right? If something bad's going to happen, let's figure it out now and make a decision now. And banks are being pretty quick about giving you a determination one way or the other if they can move forward or not. So that's an important conversation to have. And if you're going through some type of real estate transaction right now, keep that in mind. It's just the right thing to do for all parties concerned, that if you have any type of shakiness in your financial situation, let your agent know, let your mortgage broker know, and maybe they can figure out a solution and get you through it. But if not, you might as well pull the plug as early as possible and not put yourself into any type of jeopardy to forfeit your earnest money or anything like that.
So right now, all right. So I think we're going to start to wrap this up. It's 9:36. We must have our audience of 17 completely mesmerized because no one's asked any questions yet. God bless you all. but so okay, so look, so one of our audiences is folks on the mainland that are looking to buy a home in Hawaii. So given all that we've kind of talked about, what with if someone calls you, and I'm sure you've gotten those calls, and they're saying, hey, we've been kind of thinking about buying, let's just say our jobs aren't, we're financially kind of set, is now a good time to is now a good time to buy? Should we wait? What's your guys' response to that? Scott, why don't you start that off? How do you answer that?
I mean, yeah, it definitely is. But I feel like the portion, to me, there's two opportunities here. There's a couple that, and some of what I looked at last night, I was blown away. But once the quarantine portion is lifted, I feel like there's going to be inventory. Come over here at the beginning, because I feel like there will be more inventory to choose from at that time, and things will have relaxed a little bit. I feel like you can get in at that point. And where I feel like the opportunity is, which I looked last night, which goes back to the Airbnb portion, is I look at Waikiki. If you look at $1 million plus condos for the last 6 months, so there's 94 condos on the market in Waikiki over $1 million. In the last 6 months, 30 sold. In the last 30 days, 1 sold, and there is 0 in escrow. So you want to talk about an opportunity. That's it right there. And those numbers show it.
What's that opportunity? I mean,
you just went from essentially, so Waikiki was struggling a little bit from that transient accommodation bill, right? So there was more inventory coming on and some softness in Waikiki because it is such a second home market. And then when you eliminated some of the ability to Airbnb, some of those people came on the market. But what the opportunity is to get in the buy side, because if there's 1 sale in 30 days, the sales just dropped on the $1 million plus. If there's 94 on the market, that's 94 months of inventory. I just showed you guys stats where we're at 2.5 months of inventory for the island wide, and that one's at 94 months. That's insane.
So you're saying there's like so much right now. There's technically way excess inventory in Waikiki. Way excess.
To give you perspective, at the bottom of the 2008 market, when we hit 14 months of inventory remaining for the island, we dropped 11%. You're talking 94 months of inventory, right? Now, I'm not saying the bottom is going to drop out on Waikiki, but you can't tell me there's not people in Waikiki that were dependent on Airbnb rental income that need to sell in 94 units that are sitting there at $1 million plus, with no beginning in sight of when you're going to get any income.
Okay, I think I smell that one coming, right? You got these potentially Airbnbs or whatnot sitting in Waikiki that had, high mortgages, whatever, leveraged out because they were doing well under Airbnb, and now the whole market's literally dead.
It died.
And so Dana, I got it.
North Shore and Leeward or Windward Coast as well, because those are second homes kind of markets.
So that whole thing is now. So Dylan, is there any kind of a similar movement? I mean, you went into your condo, but sort of word on the street are you catching anything in that same nature in on the Kona side, where there may be a bunch of sort of Airbnbs that have been over leveraged that now they're getting ready to dump them? Have you been hearing anything empirically for you guys?
Not really. I mean, I don't have any hard evidence of that. I mean, I've definitely had conversation with clients, and I've put a few units on the market that are currently empty where they had maybe been thinking about selling. They wanted to maybe upgrade in the future, and they thought, well, if it's sitting there empty right now, I might as well put it in the market right now. So those definitely have come on the market. The other piece to the Airbnb market is what going forward are people still going to want to invest in them? Because this is for the last 10 years, it's been like a cash cow, right? I mean, I've had people buy multiple Airbnbs. It's a great investment because you can cash flow it, and then you get appreciation on that initial investment also over time. So arguably, you can do case studies and show that there's no better type of investment appreciation wise over the medium to long run than a short-term rental piece of real estate. And is that going to overall affect people's mindsets right now that, hey, maybe it's not as good of an idea to invest in that, because something like this can change everything in the blink of an eye and really turn it up on its head. So it'll be interesting to see that, that market has been super hot. I mean, it's a constant market of people coming and buying even a little condo. If you just want to get your foot into the Hawaii real estate market, come over and you can buy a $300,000 condo. have a little $500-$600 a month maintenance fee, pretty reasonable, and you can run the numbers. And if you put enough money down and your mortgage is decent, you can cash flow at a few $100 a month. So you're making a little bit of money, and then you have a place to stay for a couple of weeks when you come every year. And in 5 or 6 years, you're going to have 15-20% appreciation, and then you can sell it and make some money. So that was a pretty standard, easy decision to make for a lot of people, and I think that mindset's going to change a little bit. And then back to kind of the selling, back to Scott's point about all the additional inventory, I'm definitely seeing, anecdotally, in my world, people getting some pretty good deals right now because of the seller uncertainty. So buyers in this little window, may not go forever, but in this window right now, buyers have some buying power, and I'm seeing people make offers considerably less, 10-15% less than the list price, and then either getting them accepted or getting a really little counter offer, not back to 98% of list price, maybe back to just a couple percent more to cover some closing costs, where sellers are taking a lot less than, or being a lot softer on negotiation than they were 3 or 4 months ago.
So that's interesting. So to me, it almost smells like the ideal profile would be someone who came to Hawaii, that looked for real estate. They found the place that they wanted, but they went back and they're in the mainland. They know the place, they've seen it, and they've been on the fence. But they could buy it right now, and they know exactly what they're buying because they went there earlier. They saw the place in person. They can't go there now because of a 14-day quarantine, but they saw it. This would be the time to kind of make, not to say the crazy offer, but this is the time to kind of make a competitive offer if that house that you looked at and kind of wanted is still on the market. That's what I'm smelling.
Absolutely.
Scott?
The opportunity, like I said last week, in any market, there's opportunities that present themselves, and you can't play the market. You got to go for the opportunity that presents itself in front of you. It's as simple as that. Because there's too many times I see people going, I'm going to wait, I'm going to time the market, I want to time the bottom of the market. And you never even, first of all, you don't even see it until it's too late and it's already going back up again, and inventory is restricted. And, and then you don't see you can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. You get so blinded on trying to figure out the market and everything that you miss the opportunity that comes up right in front of you. I'm heavy on the buy side right now with us in the investment group and stuff. We are wanting to buy. We feel this is a good buy time to set us up for the next 10 years.
Sure seems like it.
It's not we're not looking at something for a 2-year kind of hold time frame. We're looking at 3+ is what our hold time frame is.
So this has been great. I can't think of anything that I need to know right now, and we don't have any. So and Katie has said there's tons of info to digest. That's why we're not. And Alex, I'd be curious about. He said, why is everyone we're waiting until virus is gone or stable? Yeah, but again, you're going to lose out on some potential opportunities. There's you could hold. There's a good reason to hold, and it's a good reason to move. Anyway, is there anything that you guys that we missed, that we didn't talk about, that you kind of want to share as we kind of wrap this up? Anything? I'm kind of done.
No, I'm good. I think that was a good discussion. There's lots of interesting stuff. And again, if anybody's got any questions, you can always get us offline. We'll repost this stuff. So we're available.
Absolutely. Yep.
I got one for you, Dylan. That pricing segment that it's showing for this, do you attribute to that just being too little of a data set for this month, and we need to see a little more data to understand where the median price is going to go on the Big Island? Yeah,
I think that April last year was an anomaly. It was just a weird month where a lot of low end stuff sold, so that it pulled the median price down. So yeah, I don't think that was a good data point to use. I wanted to keep it uniform with all of the rest of the stuff on there. But definitely, I'm with you. Year to date is definitely a better data set to use because it gives you a bigger picture on where we're at.
Yeah, more consistent.
All right, cool. This has been great, guys. We'll be, as Dylan said, we'll be reposting this on our new YouTube channel for real estate. I'll probably be breaking it up too, to kind of break this up into a couple of segments as well. It's been great. The Friday talk has been like superb. I still don't know what the hell is going on, but I guess I have a better idea to think about how to think about it. All right, you guys. Have a great one. Have a great week, and folks, we may do this again next week. We haven't made firm plans yet. We may not. It's going to depend on your feedback and what we get, and if we have something that's worth talking about. Dylan, have a good one. Scott, have a good one. You guys, aloha.
Thanks for setting it up. Have a good one.